how to write a literature review in health and social care. So we can begin by actually defining what is a literature review. Well, Aveyard offers us a lovely explanation and tells us that a literature review is a comprehensive study and interpretation of literature that refers to a particular topic. The review must be conducted in a comprehensive, rigorous and systematic manner. Otherwise, the results of the review and the conclusion drawn thereof may be unreliable. So it's really, really crucial that it is done in such a way that it can actually be replicated by the reader. And that's what we mean by systematic. It isn't something that's random, it isn't something that's just done for no reason. It's something that has actually followed a logical, chronological sort of systematic pattern, which has allowed you and enabled you to get the results that you have got from conducting that literature review. So where do you begin is the question. Where do you begin? You sort of thought, okay, I'm going to do a literature review, but what is it exactly? Where do I begin is the question. So you would really sort of start off with a broad search of the topic that you're interested in. So you'll kind of, if you're, for example, thinking about domestic violence, what you would do is you'd Google search it, or you'd use another tool, you'd maybe use Bing or any other sort of random kind of research tools. And then you kind of look over and see, okay, what's really happening within that topic? So what's going on with domestic violence? What's the literature out there? And you would, by this time, actually, while you're searching, be reading actively to see if there are any gaps in the literature. You know, from there, then you should be able to navigate towards a research question just from picking up any gaps in the literature. You should say, okay, this is maybe an area that hasn't been done. Most of the literature is directing me to that aspect of it. Okay, so what is it that I'm going to actually research? What will be my research question? And really, when you're coming up with a research question, you're trying to construct one, the biggest tip that I could possibly give is you need to make sure that your question is not already been answered. You might find that actually you think of a question, but then you do a bit more searching, and voila, you know, somebody's already come up with the same question and somebody's already answered it. So that's why, you know, the searching process should not be rushed. It should be something that actually takes probably the longest part of the entire literature review. It's really that searching for literature and really coming up with a research question that hasn't been answered before. So what's next? Once you've sort of established what your research question is, what are you going to go on to do next? What are you going to go on to do after that? Right, so you really want to sort of start searching now. Start searching for relevant papers to include in your review. So you've got your research question, you've said this is the area that I want to research. Right, I need to find the papers that will help to answer that question. That is what is meant. So if we go back to our prior definition of what a literature review is, that is what is meant by taking a comprehensive study. It's the fact that what you're doing here is you've constructed a research question and you're using relevant literature to help and enable you to answer that question. Okay, so remember, however, that a literature search must be done systematically, in which the reader must be able to replicate your search. We need to know exactly how you got to the papers that you got to. It cannot be something that's random. You need to be able to say exactly, especially when you're coming to do your methodology chapter, how you came on to get the results that you did. How did you come on to get those specific papers? Okay, and at what point did you reach that you said, right, I no longer need to research anymore? A couple of tips that you need to kind of remember is that you cannot read all of the material that's out there. Okay, and that's why it's really handy that you kind of write down how you did your research. Okay? So how do I search for my papers? There's a variety of ways that you can actually search for your papers. Since this is primarily looking at literature reviews that are to do with research in healthcare, you'd probably be more suited to go on to search for health databases such as PubMed, CINAHL, Aveyard, and PsycInfo. The options are vast. Ensure that the terms that you are using are specific to your research question, and use Boolean operators to make your search as effective as possible. Keep a record of terms that you've used and hits that you've obtained. Now that's really, really useful and crucial. Once you have found your papers, you have by this point hopefully looked at your papers, and you have decided that they will help to answer your research question. Well done for this. Once you've reached this section, well done. Really, really well done. Now you must start to critically appraise your papers and show that you've considered the quality of the papers. How valuable and rigorous are your papers? You may wish to use the CAST tool to assess the quality. Again, it's depending on what kind of methodological approach that you're using. Are you using a mixed methods sort of studies? Are you looking at qualitative studies? Are you looking at quantitative studies? It all depends on what you are looking at. So what have you found? This is when you've sort of started to come onto your findings chapter and you start to think about how you will present it. What is it actually that you found? You've assessed your papers. What is it that you found? Can you spot any similarities and differences between the studies? And how will you present your findings? So for example, if you're doing a qualitative study and you're looking at a series of qualitative studies, you might think about summarizing your findings using thematic analysis, perhaps using a conceptual framework. These are just things to think about. Once you've presented your findings, now it's important to discuss your findings, and you'll be discussing these findings in light of sort of wider literature. So you'll be looking at any sort of interesting articles that you might have read that have somehow linked to your topic, but not have specifically answered that particular research question. Are there also things to think about is, are your findings consistent with other pieces of literature out there? Are there any strengths and limitations to your review? Particularly thinking about methodological limitations within the papers themselves, and also you at this point as a researcher, have you had any sort of bias with regards to your research, and really what are the implications of your findings for further research, practice and education? Because really and primarily the reason why we do literature reviews is because what we really want is to have something called evidence-based practice. We want everything that we do to have evidence behind it. Last but not least, you come into your conclusion, which hopefully will summarize all the main points that you've reviewed from your findings, as well as sort of give an overview of exactly what's been done. Right, and that's your way, to conclude, that is your way of doing a literature review.